I realized that I was just wired through trauma, that my whole little system was just this little traumatized girl trying to think she needed to survive. No amount of green smoothies that was going to green smoothie me out of this way of thinking. Finally, I was like, oh my gosh, it's my beliefs.
Dr. Mariza has a top-rated podcast with more than 12 million downloads. Her best-selling book has 1,249 five-star reviews, and she is here today to help us get off of the stress hamster wheel.
I had a defining moment when I was 12 years old, living with my dad and my stepmother, who neither of them put any stock in me. I remember them saying, like, good luck amounting to anything. And at the time, I was a C and D student. I sat there in my room and I was like, okay, well, I've got to find a way out of here if I want to make anything of myself. And then I asked myself, well, what does it take? Like, how do I do this? And the answer that came to me was,
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. Dear listener, you are probably stressed. Well, that is contingent on one thing. I am assuming you are actually alive and living in this modern world. Then yes, you are stressed. Be it politics, pollution, radiation, tough workouts, tough job, or the stress of family, including kids. We were just talking about that. You are on the stress hamster wheel. But did you consider there is the possibility that you are addicted to stress? I met our next guest, Dr. Mariza. Did I get that right?
Mariza.
Dr. Mariza. It's just so ingrained. Fine. Dr. Mariza.
I know, yeah, exactly. Get it.
At a recent Health Biz Growth event. Well, they just changed the name to that. And she is here today to help us get off of the stress hamster wheel. Dr. Mariza. Dr. Yes. Mariza is a functional doctor, a perimenopause and menopause expert. Dr. Mariza has a top-rated podcast with more than 12 million downloads. Her best-selling book has 1,249 five-star reviews. Most books don't even ever sell 1,000 copies, let alone get 1,200 plus five-star reviews. She has worked as a biomechanical engineer at Lawrence Livermore National Labs, which is really cool because I've sold the industrial version of our carbon nanomaterial product to Lawrence Livermore Labs. Oh. She is an author. Her podcast is titled Energize. She has appeared on the Dr. Oz show and has been featured in the Oprah magazine. She has 134,000 followers on Instagram, 190 on Facebook. 190,000, let's just be clear, that wasn't 190 people. Her message has clearly captured the minds of so many. Today, we are going to talk about stress, the powerful stress cycle, and how to get off the stress hamster wheel. Dr. Mariza, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. I'm so excited for our combo.
So before we jump into your area of expertise, I want to go kind of further back, much farther back. What was it like growing up little Mariza? Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? And if there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become an author, a wellness expert, a podcaster, what or who would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely my parents. If I had to nail that, I think any of us that are, I don't know if achieving, I always say that I'm, although it looks like I'm running towards something, probably running from something. I had a lot of trauma as a child. I had a lot of child abuse, and I was in between homes, and I went to, I think, 13 schools by the time I was in 7th grade, getting pulled out of schools for numbers of reasons. And I had a defining moment when I was 12 years old, living with my dad and my stepmother, who neither of them put any stock in me. I remember them saying, like, good luck amounting to anything. Like, we just want you to not get in trouble. We don't care what kind of grade you get, nothing. And I remember that I knew that they were not my path out into the world. But I also, it was instilled in me from the Mexican side of my family, my mom's side, that we all go to college. And so I was like, gosh, well, if they're not banking on me to go to school, I better bank on me. And at the time I was a C and D student. And I remember I was heading into 7th grade, and I was sitting in my room. I was often locked in there, and I was reading a book. And I remember kind of it was about a year that I had been living there with them, and what they, initially when parents say some things, maybe you don't necessarily believe them. But a year later, I was like, oh no, they mean it. They do not care about what happens. And I sat there in my room and I was like, okay, well, I've got to find a way out of here. Like I got to climb out of this hole. If I want to make anything of myself. And so I committed. I remember counting the amount of days it was going to take for me to get out of this place, this home, and get off to school or to just go become something. And then I asked myself, well, what does it take? Like, how do I do this? And the answer that came to me was, you have got to read your way out of this. And so I started reading a book a day. And I did that for years and years. I ended up graduating second in my class. I full honors, 5.0 GPA, academic scholarships. I left that house, my senior year. I actually didn't even finish school at that home. And I was a driver. Do you remember we had 10-minute recess between classes in high school? Do you remember? And if people would, you go see your friends, you'd go get your books to the next class. No, I was running to meetings. I was meeting with the principal. I was meeting with the newspaper. I was the editor of the newspaper. I mean, I ran that school. That's what I did. And so I was pulled out of class all the time, not for trouble, but because I had a meeting with some administrator about what the prom was going to be like, or what the spirit week was going to be. I mean, I was that girl. And so from as early as I can remember, I was running, and I wore tennis shoes as a result. And so because I figured I could get there a lot faster if I wore tennis shoes. And so I was actually pretty addicted to stress, or I was in survival mode from a very early age. And so it wasn't surprising that by the time I was 30, I was significantly burning out, big time. And so that was my childhood in a nutshell, me running from it.
One little question, right? Because you described kind of a lot of trauma, right? A lot of challenges and not belief. But you said, if I was going to become something, then I had to do something. What gave you the belief that you could become something that had to come maybe outside of that environment?
It was kind of just a generalization on the So I am, I guess you could say, a Dutch, American, something European on my dad's side. And then I'm Mexican, full Mexican. So I'm half and half. And my grandparents were, I want to say they were not the first generation into America. I think basically second generation, but basically very immigrant mindset, entrepreneurial. And they worked every day to put my mother and her brothers, my uncles, into college. And so all of my mother, all of those kids went to school. And so it is just the way it was. We were going to college, my sister and I. My dad's side of the family, I am still the only person in that family who has a college education, and a higher education as well. And so my dad's side, why do you go? So there was this thing that even though no one was betting on me, nobody, even the Mexican side of the family, they were like, girl, you're going to have to work. There isn't natural talent here. You're going to have to work harder than everybody else to achieve. But if you're willing to do more than most, you'll probably be okay. And then my dad's side was like, maybe just don't do anything. Like, we don't think it's worth it.
It's an interesting, you laugh, or I laugh, because it's uncomfortable, right? Like, this is not what you would hope for or whatever. And then in the end, put you in an amazing place. So well done, kind of driving.
It was a whole lot of what not to do. That was the lesson. Even in parenthood, I was like, oh, I can't take any of that with me into becoming the mom or the parent I want to be. And so it was a whole lot of, what not to do. And, I think there was this intrinsic, I will say my mother's mother, my grandmother, again, I wasn't doing well in school. They put us in Catholic school for a minute. This is right before I got moved out. I emancipated from my mom when I was 11 or 12. And my grandmother, obviously grades were bad. And for, again, number of reasons. My grandmother, I used to always go, it's what she told me, because I never understood why she decided to bet on me. So I guess if you had to put someone down, it was my grandmother, my mother's mother, my grandma Rachel, who's still alive at 92 years old, turned 92 this weekend. And,
Wow.
And so they had, do you remember the encyclopedias that your grandmothers, people, and so I guess
used them I'm older.
You still
I used
you
them.
have a set. It's called ChatGPT. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No,
So
I
I guess,
used them. I
oh,
don't have
you
them
use them.
anymore, but
Oh,
I
okay,
did
okay.
in fact use them. I
Uh,
remember going through
yeah,
encyclopedias
Chris.
to put together book reports.
Yeah, so I was doing this. I would go to my grandmother's and I would be the only one. Like, no one ever touched these. Nobody. And no one thought, and I don't know if anyone ever noticed except for her, but I guess every time I would go over there, I would go through the encyclopedias. And so she saw something. And so she decided to get me a tutor. It was a nun. I had a tutor who was a nun and with reading comprehension. She didn't like math. So it was only reading comprehension that she would focus on with me. And that was the seed. She had me believing. She's like, if you can comprehend, stories and understand literature and, you can figure it all. You can figure it out. If you can figure this out, you can figure anything out. And so there was this belief, this was before I moved into my father's house, that there was something that someone believed in me enough. And it wasn't family per se. My grandmother wasn't sure what was going to happen, but then I just kind of, I held on to that, and I held on to that little seed until a defining moment, the summer before I was going into 7th grade, or maybe it was 8th grade, and I was 12 years old. And I was like, okay, you know what? There's worth trying. Like, no one's betting on you. You're the only person who can. And really you're stuck here. You're stuck in this place. You're stuck with these people. I'll never forget. I had a teacher who told me, like, treat them like they're roommates, because it was just so bad.
Oh, wow.
And so at some point I did. I was like, these are just people. These people are just roommates for me to live with. Who obviously, housed me and fed me. That was true. But yeah. And then I started. I remember my grades. 8th grade year. Went to, I think I ended up becoming a straight A student that year, and it never changed moving forward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like, so that little bit of belief, you ended up with a tutor who would focus on reading, right? And then you ended up reading a book a day. And I think if you're reading a book a day, there's nothing you can't accomplish. Like, I think that's it. You've just got to have the right. So you describe yourself, and we see some of this, right? As you're having all these meetings, as a recovering stressaholic. Why did you give yourself that moniker? What did you do to change? And talk a little bit about how focused on efficiency that you have been at different times in your life.
Oh my goodness, my level of efficiency. Oh man. If anyone today, currently, if we're in a bathroom line, you want to be behind me. If we are pumping, if we're in a gas pumping line, be behind me. Like I spent many years in my 20s timing myself to get faster. This was a time where I didn't really know a lot about nutrition. This was right after college, probably when I was working at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory as a biochemist. I would do TV dinners. I was on my own living, I didn't know, I guess I just didn't know any better. Ugh, it's cringeworthy, really. I think I was still drinking Diet Pepsis back then. And God. And I could put that TV dinners like 5 minutes in the microwave, something like that. I could get it in the microwave. I showered, and I could be out of the shower before that was done and dressed to eat. And so everything, if I could speed it up, if I could get there faster, and I'm still, unfortunately, that is such a strong pattern in my system that I really struggle with the flow. And my husband is the opposite. Like, I run a tight shop when it comes to nighttime routine, morning routine, and I try to make it fun and wonderful, but my son is never late to school, that kind of a thing. But if my husband, it's my husband's job, my son is 100% late to school, preschool. And so, all of a sudden bath time is 45 minutes. I'm like, whoa, we had a 15-minute block. And so, it's really interesting living with somebody who doesn't have time efficiency and really kind of letting it go, because it can really work. Like, especially if we're going to a doctor's appointment or something, like I have to be on time, because it's about, I grew up, my father was always on time. On time was late. Yeah. And so early
Dutch,
was
right?
on
You
time.
said some Dutch in there, and I think they're well known for being on time.
Yeah. And that man was always on time, and my mother was always late, always. And so, I think, and there was something my dad said to me that I probably was the kind of a little bit of trauma around that, but they would again drop off, because they were divorced very early. So there was pick up and drop off for us to go to different homes. And my mom would sometimes be 2 to 3 hours late to pick us up. And my dad would tell us that she doesn't love us. And it was terrible. Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me, I thought like, she's like, it's so disrespectful that level of disrespect means that someone cannot love you. And so it's so interesting how these little things, add up over time. And so till this day, I'm extremely efficient. I do not believe if someone's late that they don't love you. But man, he just really ingrained.
It took some therapy, but I now no longer believe that.
A lot of therapy. A lot of therapy for a lot of things.
It may be the engineering, because my background's engineering, and I am constantly thinking about how to do things more efficiently. What's the best way, which I think there's value in that, right? I think the point in your case is that there was stress associated with that. How have you kind of evolved out of that stress?
Have I?
Or have you?
I have. I have. It requires a lot of deep intention every single day. I would say that my stress response system, my brain, and all of our brains are wired for protection. Our brains are wired for survival. Our brains are wired to find again, stranger danger moments like, oh, goodness, and so, it's a lot of, I send my brain a lot of safety signals every single day. So I wake up in the morning before everybody else. So that means I go to bed pretty early. So so I always say your morning starts in your evening. So if you want to get up at 5:30 in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, it's really hard to do that if you're not in bed until like midnight or 11 o'clock at night. So my son's asleep. He's in bed 7:45, 8 at the latest. Okay. How many, 3 books maybe. Lights are out. And then I have about an hour. I'm in bed at 9. And I'm usually reading something. I have a really solid sleep routine and I follow it to a T, and I can get into all that, but we're focusing on the morning. And so I wake up at 6 o'clock. First thing I do is I do a 30-minute Dr. Joe Dispenza meditation. And then I'm up and I'm either outside getting sunlight on my eyes. So getting light, really resetting those circadian rhythms, supporting my cortisol awakening response to some degree. And then, I'm working out. I'm doing something that's nourishing me. I'm drinking coffee. I'm drinking my greens, my water. And then I'm in the routine of kind of getting the morning routine going. And so I'm really good about that. I walk outside in nature probably 3 to 4 times a day. And I take a lot of movement breaks. And then also at night, I'm also usually in that 8 to 9 period. I'm in the sauna 3 to 4 days a week. But I just give myself a lot of little breaks throughout the day, lots of little cuddles with my son. I feel like oxytocin is like the queen hormone that can trump cortisol. So I'm just making sure that I'm giving myself, even we're talking 30 seconds, 3-minute breaks to kind of reset the system. And I try to do my best to not overschedule myself.
So how has stress and managing stress evolved over time? And maybe you have some sort of defining moment where you're like, okay, this is something that I need to really manage.
Yeah. So great question. I'll talk about the defining moments. I was in practice at 30 years old, and I had been
So how'd you get into practice? Talk a little bit about that, right? So you started off in biochemical engineering and then evolved into your own practice. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. And for the most part at the lab, it was a means to an end. I was a big, I won a huge grant. It's called the Barrett Grant in college. And I got this coveted position at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And my supervisor, I forget his name, but he had to hold a massive building named after him at UC Davis. So he was my shoe-in to UC Davis Medical School. And I worked there as a biochemist, and I actually did mostly contract work for the CIA and I worked with biological weapons, and also worked in transcribing mitochondrial DNA. But do you remember when we had those anthrax envelopes?
Yep.
Way back when, 2003. Yep. I worked on that project, trying to decipher through transcribing that mitochondrial DNA. So those are the types of projects I would do at the lab because, it's a nuclear arms lab, And so if the type of biochemistry work that was being done there was often, more in the realm of,
Bad
protecting
for
the
you,
country.
not
Yeah.
good for you.
It was a lot of contracts with the government. So often it was because a lot of the work was sealed. I didn't really know the work I was doing. I just was assigned that. So I worked there for 3 years, and actually, I had migraine since I was 7 years old due to getting hit in the head a bit. So I went to everyone and every person, neurologists, primaries, chiropractors, all kinds of people. And I was just told that I was going to have migraines for the rest of my life, and that I was just going to need to medically manage them with drugs. But ultimately, I went to this. I remember having someone at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, another fellow biochemist, had them as well. And there was this functional practitioner that she went to it was a 45-minute commute in the Bay Area to get to that job. And on my way, I could stop by this. It was a naturopathic doctor. It was a functional doctor, upper cervical chiropractor. It was a whole slew of people. And it was through there that my migraines, after, 15 years, were cured.
Wow.
For a while. They came back. But it blew my mind. And that actually shifted my career path, at least for a minute. And so I went off and I went to chiropractic school, but I really focused on migraine and pain management. Found out that a lot of women were struggling with migraines. Like myself, I was not the only one. Actually, 78% of migraine sufferers are women, and often are related to hormone issues, particularly estradiol. And so I had this practice of migraine patients, and all these women were in midlife, in perimenopause at the time, kind of didn't know it was perimenopause, like they were close to menopause, but they were just getting siloed. They had cardiovascular, abnormal lipids, so they were in that department. They had pain, so they were being, routed over to neurology, or so they were just siloed. Although I was like, gosh, there's something else going on here. There seems to be a unifying situation. At the same time, a lot of the symptoms they had, I was dealing with too. And I was like, this is an endocrine driven problem. It's hormones. And so as I began more of my functional training in helping women to be like, okay, we need to work with our hormones and figure out what's going with that, and really bring in lifestyle medicine. But at the same time, I was struggling with the same symptoms that 48-year-old women were dealing with at 30 years old. And so when I really kind of dialed it down, I realized that it was definitely cortisol. Well, I didn't say it was necessarily chronic fatigue, but it definitely felt that way. And that my stress response system was extremely deregulated, that I was constantly in a state of chronic stress, and that was just wearing me down, ultimately causing mitochondrial dysfunction, insulin resistance, a lot of different issues. And that's what chronic stress will do. It'll just wear your system down, particularly at a cellular level and the immune system.
So talk about the connection between kind of cortisol dysregulation, symptoms like fatigue, anxiety, weight gain. Where are all these tying together?
Absolutely. So again, as I mentioned, this all stems from the fact that your brain has one job, and that's to protect you from dangerous situations. And so when your brain perceives a threat, whether it is you're running late to a meeting, or you are having an argument with your partner, or you are trying to get your kids off to school and they're not cooperating with you, right? Any of these things, all of these things, it can be a yes and. Many of these things can be happening at the same time. So the amygdala, which I call the stranger danger part of the brain, it's in the limbic system, is right next to that hypothalamus. It's the one that's sensing anything and everything. Danger, 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 danger. And it is telling the hypothalamus and the pituitary to release that hormone to the adrenals, to release epinephrine, norepinephrine, and ultimately cortisol. And cortisol is the long play. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are meant to dilate those pupils, to release glycogen from the liver, to fire up the muscles. And now you're in a state where if you need to fight, freeze, or flee, you're ready, right? So your system is like kind of jacked with hormones, ready to roll. And what's interesting about that way of feeling, like if you've ever had that little zip of energy, this is the addiction piece, right? It can feel initially when I was in my 20s and my 30s, where I still had more metabolic flexibility, my body was able to be more resilient. It felt like I called it my slight edge. That's what it felt like. Like, my uncle would say, hey, if you can go harder than somebody else, you're winning the game. And so I was like, oh, this is my go harder move. What I didn't know is that I was stealing from myself the entire time. You can't operate at that level of adrenaline all the time. You just can't. Eventually your body's going to be like, this isn't safe, right? And there's nothing safe necessarily about it. This is survival. So I was constantly racing from one thing to the next, just running from, as you could say, running from something my whole life, pursuing something. And I was constantly activating this stress response system. But when you activate that stress response system many, many times a day, to become more efficient in life, to pursue whatever you're pursuing, it's going to wear and tear on you, right? We're going to increase cytokines in the body. We're going to end up, lighting up the immune system. We're going to drive more glucose in the bloodstream. That's going to lead to more insulin in the bloodstream having to deal with this. Because if you aren't actually running, well, that increase in blood glucose isn't necessarily doing you any favors. If anything, it's driving more inflammation in the body. And so I always say that, when you're in that constant state and anyone who wants to see this in real time, I always say, put a continuous glucose monitor on. So a continuous glucose monitor is a sensor that measures your glucose in interstitial fluid. And you can scan it throughout the day and you can really track lifestyle. I always call it the ultimate biomarker. We don't have the ability to measure insulin in real time with a CGM, but we can do it with glucose. So we can get a good sense of what's going on. It's a great proxy. And you'll notice that if you are racing somewhere and let's say you didn't even have breakfast. So there wasn't a substrate or food fuel that drove that blood sugar spike. Let's say you're racing to get to wherever you're going and you see a blood sugar spike more than 30 milligrams per deciliter. That's a stress response blood sugar spike. And I have seen it more than once on myself. So I know what it looks like.
She says knowingly.
I'm like, oh, interesting. And, there's nothing more telling, than real-time data. I also wear a Whoop strap, so it measures my stress as well. I'm actually interviewing Dr. Kristen Holmes today. We're going to be talking about the stress response system as well and recovery and how to increase your HRV. But yeah, so I've seen this play out. So you can imagine if your body's in survival, ready to run, that's a lot of the system having to be ready. And over time, neurons that wire together, fire together. So if this is how you are living your life every day, I love Louise Hay's quote, like how you start your morning is how you live your day. How you live your day is how you live your life. And if your morning starts off as chaos, well, let me tell you, your whole life is going to look a lot like that. And it's more so chaos in the system, right? A stress response system that is constantly overactivated. And some of us can activate that system 10, 20 plus times a day. So every day you're in this little emergency state. Maybe it feels like, again, you're that slight edge, until it doesn't, until you start to crash and burn, because ultimately your body cannot be at that state of constant constant adrenaline, constant, having to, be in a survival type of a situation.
Yeah, I think kind of evolutionarily, the state's purpose was to get away from a lion or catch a deer or whatever, and then it was supposed to turn off. And in fact, in both of those situations, it's accompanied with physical activity, right? Like when you're running, right? So you get these spikes, you get this glycogen, that's why it's dropping in. And then you're actually supposed to burn it off, which I've got a question about that.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
One of the things you talked about, efficient, like when you're striving for this efficient life, and maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about mindset, right? Because I have this impression that your striving for efficiency was a need, was a like I'm failing or I'm in danger if I don't get more efficient. And there's another perspective, which is, hey, it'd be kind of cool if I could do this faster, right? And then you're like playing around and it's a lot of fun and there's no cortisol dropping. Talk about how mindset has that impact. And then I want to understand how physical activity may have been part of your life through all of this stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love that question when I saw it earlier, Chris, and I was like, oh, mindset is everything. So yeah, absolutely. From that early age, I was like, if I don't, again, there was no buffer behind me. I was like, I was it. I always say that I'm the horse to bet on. I still am. I'm still the horse to bet on. You want to bet on a horse? I'm it. And so I was like, man, if I don't, there was never going to be what happens if. There was no alternative. The only way was through as far as I was concerned. And honestly, the way that I operated those earlier years, it's so funny when people are living rent free in your head, and they don't even know they're living rent free. And so I was really determined. I was on this pursuit to show my family that they were all wrong. So I was pursuing for the sake of like, let me show you. And I remember waking up one day and I'm like, how did I get here? I don't even know how I got here. It's exhausting. And I remember even in the process of healing my stress response system, I was checking the boxes. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing all the things. And I remember, I'm sure all of us have been there when we're trying for something and we just land back on the floor again. And maybe it's a health journey where you're like, you're really working to feel better. And then you just land back on the floor and you're like, I'm doing all the things. Like, I don't understand why I'm back here again. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's how I'm thinking about it all. It's how I'm operating in life. I'm trying to will myself out of sickness. And there's something to be said about that too, like betting on yourself in terms of getting well. Absolutely. But to me, it was very much a detriment. I was just spiraling back to where I was. There was no amount of yoga if I was thinking about yoga in that way. There was no amount, no amount of green smoothies that was going to green smoothie me out of this way of thinking. And finally, I was like, oh my gosh, it's my beliefs. It's my beliefs in myself. It's my lack of worthiness. It's my a fear of failure. It's none of this isn't going to get me where I want to go. And so then I had to start doing some really deep work. I hired an internal family systems therapist. I did somatic therapy. I did trauma therapy. I realized that I was just wired through trauma, that my whole little system was just this little traumatized girl trying to think she needed to survive. So everyone's like, oh, how did you turn it around? I was like, oh my God, it was years of super deep work, years of slowing down, years of doing really the opposite of what I had been doing, the way I had been doing it. And yeah, I mean, the idea of flow, I used to call it, I had all these names. I call it inspired action. It was just action. It was survival action, but I had a sexy name attached to it. And so it's like, you have a vision, you hold a vision, and then you need to take inspired action. I'm like, oh, I'm your inspired action girl all day. I can take inspired action for you, if you like. And so, I had to really untether myself from that. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, I think it's the lesson to learn, at least for me, is that it's always the lesson to learn. I can fall back into those patterns so easily. And I have to just be really mindful about like, what if like yesterday's a great example. Yesterday, there was a coveted preschool that I really wanted my son to get into. Not preschool, it's a summer camp. He's already in the coveted preschool. Mom already did all that. And so
that's already checked.
That already checked that box. I got him into the best
action.
Kindergarten, did all the things. And so this is summer camp and it opens at 10 a.m. yesterday. And it's not very clear. There's a button to click, but I'm not, like, do I fill out registration papers? Like, I know it's a very hard summer camp to get into and there are a lot of people vying for these spots. And so I'm on there at 9:50. I'm refreshing. And all of a sudden the system entirely crashes. It crashes. And my husband, I'm like, you needed to be home already because my husband's IT and we've had stuff crash on our side, right? In our business and where thousands of people are trying to get into something and then boom, it just all crashes. And so we're calling them, we're emailing them. My stress response system is lit up, let me tell you. And they're like, sorry, the whole thing crashed and it'll come back at some point and still first come, first serve. I mean, I'm like, all hands on deck, everybody. Thank God we're entrepreneurs. And so we are on there. Also, my son has a doctor's appointment for a eye surgery referral that day. Yesterday. And this was something, this part of you, like after all the research and the doctor's appointments and everything, that this was the right decision for him. But there was a part of me that I just didn't want to take him to this appointment. Like I had a lot of anxiousness around it, but I knew it was the right decision. And so sure enough, we pick him up for preschool. All of us are in the car because my husband's coming with me to this particular appointment. It's a big deal. And on our way, racing from preschool to this appointment, 'cause gosh forbid I'd be late. Can't be late to this appointment. Yep. Okay.
Not an option.
And that's why I'm driving the car. I'm driving my husband's in the back with my son. And sure enough, on the way to that doctor's appointment, the system goes back up. And I'm like, okay, session 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10. I'm just like, all this. We get every single session. And then literally friends of mine, within minutes, they're waitlisted. And so again, there's some times where I'm really grateful for the superpower of that I have it, that I'm just, I am out of sheer will and determination. I will win. I'm going to win the day. But also I prayed and I sent it up and I held a high vision and I was like, it's all going to go in my favor. It's all going to happen the way it's meant to. It's all going to work itself out. And I put a lot of inspired action into all of those things yesterday to make it all happen and on time.
So you're the horse to bet on, right? Like, right? That makes perfect sense. You talked about internal family systems therapist.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That sounds exactly like what an engineer would hire in terms of a therapist. Like you can't just say family therapist. It has to be an internal family systems therapist. That's I don't even know exactly what that is, but it speaks to us as engineers.
Very specific type of therapy. Okay.
It's about systems because what we need is more inspired systems.
Yes. It's parts work. Have you ever heard of parts work where little parts of you have a protector part that's protecting the little kind of the quieter self?
No, I get the concept.
Yeah. So that allows to give, and I have a lot of protector. Obviously, my little self she never gets to say it's your authentic self. She's like, excuse me. And my protector's like, just why don't you sit back down over there? Let me handle this for you, Yeah. And so it's finding ways to help the protector feel safe, step aside so that your authentic self is coming into play.
Talk a little bit about, so yesterday, there's lots of opportunity for stress. You're describing this and you're clearly on top of it, but I didn't get stress from what you were describing. I'm sure there's some, but like, how would you have handled that, maybe 5 years ago or something? How was that kind of evolution?
No, I handled it exactly how I would have handled it 5 years ago, Chris. That's what I was sharing.
Now, do you feel like you have less stress? Like, do you feel like the stress is, hey, this is good. This is, because there's some data solid data that suggests if your opinion about stress is that it's stressful and it's this block between you and where you want to get is very different than if it's a challenge and you're going to be a better person on the other side of it. Have you worked on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the deeper work as well. And yeah, Chris, I came in winning yesterday. Let me tell you, I was winning. Okay. And we tackled a lot of other things together, my husband and I, because we were together all day, most of the day, which is not typical. And what a blessing it is to be entrepreneurs and to get to be at the computer all day, waiting to get signed up for summer camp. You know what I'm saying? And then to both be able to show up for that doctor's appointment as well and schedule his surgery and all those things and feel really good about it and high five each other. And right after that. So I think more so, yeah, understanding the good stress versus I'm constantly in a doomsday. Life is not on my side, like, and it's not working out for me. It's a very different energy. I had a beautiful call lined up after that, all that stuff. And I was walking outside in nature, talking to one of my dearest friends, and we both just turned our books in, my book number 9 and her book number 2. And we were celebrating, and we were kind of processing kind of how intense our manuscript writing process was and how we did it, like major high five. And I think I have a much better ability to, even in those heightened moments, like I can get myself back to homeostasis really fast. And I did that through being outside, talking to my friend, and really being in deep appreciation for how everything ultimately 100% worked out yesterday.
I imagine the kind of the decompressing, the being outside was maybe something that you wouldn't have afforded yourself, some
years ago.
Some years
back.
Back.
There was, or walking. Yeah, it was very much of the mindset. I don't have time for walking. Like, unless it's a hardcore workout, no pain, no gain. Unless it's moving me forward, I don't do it.
Yeah. I learned that last year, right? Like I learned a piece of it in the middle of pandemic. My run was always 3. I did 3. Like that's what I would do if I went for a run. And I realized, after the fact, during pandemic, my wife was going out for 2-mile runs, like this 20 minutes, 22 minutes, something like that. So I was like, well, I can do that. Like let's just stop doing the 3. And what I came to realize is the 3 was holding me back from how many times I worked out per week. Right. Because I wouldn't do 3 every day, but I would do 2 every day.
Standard. Yeah.
And right. And then now I've evolved to understand that, if you want to do what I consider now a healthier exercise, which is walking over running, it's slow and it's not it's painful because it's slow. It's not painful because you're jogging so far. And it's just taken me a while to get on that. I think there's a lot of value in zone 2. And as a former athlete, like, it's hard to get to zone 2.
It is. Oh my gosh. I do zone 2 training every week, multiple times a week. Yesterday was a zone 2 training day and today was a lift day, but I had a choice today. I finished my workout. I did the whole shebang. I did the heavy lift and I could sit at my computer and move things through before our interview, or I could walk to the ocean. So, and I chose the ocean. I was like, you know what? I have a minute today. I have 20 minutes. By the way, I know how quick I can get there and back, 18 minutes. And so I knew my time.
And if I increase my pace by just 1/10 of a second per stride,
17 minutes.
I also know what it's going to be. In one interview, I actually saw you talking about being in your late luteal phase and how you had to listen to your body to back off on some resistance training you had scheduled. There is, and certainly you and I would be on the same page with it, there is value in pushing yourself. In fact, I think it's important to push yourself. At the same time, you also have to be a part of your mind that's trying to come up with it, right? You got to fight that part of your mind that's coming up with just excuses, right? How do you think you balance this, fighting the excuses and listening to your body?
Yeah, I'm a no excuses person. I'm just not, and so
you're just listening to your body, right? Like
I'm just listening to my body. Yeah. Cause ultimately the normal or the default is you do the effing workout. This is what you do. And it sucks and it's not good. Working out is my favorite thing in the world. I love it. I've been working out since I was 16 years old. I played soccer in high school, and my coach back in the day he was like, you train 3 days a week. And so before I was even in college, I was training in the gym. And so I've always been a gym rat. I've always lifted weights. I was a personal trainer at one point in my life. I've got multiple personal training certifications like TRX and all kinds of stuff and kettlebells. And so to me, it was like, you just do it. But in that processing, again, when you've got nothing in the tank and yet you still show up and you do the thing, working out was always I would say the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I have overworked myself into complete obliteration and burnout. And so I'm really mindful, because the question I have to ask myself is, do you want to keep doing this? Do you like this? Do you love this? Well, then you better be careful. You get to be intentional about how you train. and in recovery is important. And so those couple of days, I remember when I didn't understand cycle syncing, or I didn't know anything about my cycle, like so many of us, so many women, and men too, like, it's changed so much. I mean, menstrual cycle literacy, hormone literacy, like it's so beautiful to hear girls talking about it. But I remember I would be like day 26, day 27. And I always joke that everybody wants day 12 us, even us. Right before ovulation, we're the strongest, we're the most outgoing, we're the most intimate, we're flushed with estrogen. It's that estradiol peak. But man, day 27, day 26, like nobody wants that version of us often. And I think that there's something to be said about honoring who she is, because that's who we are then. But I remember I would show up for the big workout on those days, and I would just beat myself up because I wasn't able to be day 12 me. I was like, why can't I do this? Like 2 weeks ago, I was doing clean and presses. I was throwing weights. And now, man, I am barely getting through this workout and it is killing me. And I would just be like, you're a failure. Like, why can't you do this? And now I know why. I know why. And so on those days, I always do something. Even when I was recovering from my brain injury, even when I have a horrible, horrible migraine, I still move. I still clock 10,000 steps a day, come rain or shine. Okay. Yeah. I have walking pads in my house and I adapt and I pivot based on how I feel. So I do like a full body check and scan every day, every morning. And I just check in. I also look at my Whoop, see, what's my body battery? How much strain do I have in me to push? And I kind of base that on all my metrics and then how I'm feeling for the day. But my default is to train every day if I can.
And I think that's smart. Like I've given, I know a lot of people who might be, potentially listening to this podcast or seeking out somebody like you, maybe on like they're not really working out. And I like the perspective of, listen, if they're like in my case, the 3 miles was actually a hindrance.
Yeah.
If the thought of walking 10 minutes a day causes you to miss a day, stop and only walk 5 minutes a day, right? And we know we want to build that up, but if the thought of building it up slows you down, stop thinking about it. Just get the 5 minutes in. And by the way, 5 minutes a day, that's 35 minutes a week. 5 minutes a day is much better than 35 minutes one day a week, right?
Yep.
So yeah, just get that movement. And if it's simple, if you've trained hard, walking and a leisurely bike ride are hard because they don't feel like real workouts, but they're really valuable.
Deeply valuable. Yeah,
Absolutely.
deeply valuable. Kind of one of my big things that I'm talking a lot about today is building your life around movement. Intentionally build your life around movement. Don't build movement around life. Yeah. And I know we're talking about 5 minutes a day, but like, what if it's a couple of 5 minutes a day, or what if it's an exercise? I have 15-pound weights next to me at all times. I can't go around them without, I have to step over these things. And I knock out exercise snacks constantly. I usually do 3 to 4 sets of exercise snacks. So like I'll do squats, I'll do jump squats with them. I'll walk my stairs. I'll do a farmer's walk with my 15s. And I've got bigger ones somewhere else, but these are just kind of they go with me everywhere I go. If I'm doing podcasts, they're here in the podcast room. If I'm in my other room, they're in that room. And so some days when we're stacked meeting to meeting, you only have 3 minutes. It's a lot you can do in 3 minutes with 15-pound weights or 10-pound weights. You know what I'm saying? So I'm a big proponent of like, build your life around movement. And even if it's gentle movement, maybe it's some yoga exercises or stretching or walking outside in nature for a minute. All of my girlfriend talks, all of my real-time girlfriend get-togethers, it's centered around walking and walking and matcha.
Walking in matcha. Yeah, you said that there's certainly a lot you can do in 3 minutes. I feel like you would know because you're probably timing it.
You'd be amazed. I could walk you through a whole routine right now in 3 minutes.
So how do we recognize we're in stress, and what are some emergency quick things that we can do to reduce our stress levels?
Absolutely. That's such a great question. Yeah. So there's like a little bit of a kind of an evaluation. So for instance, if you're saying things like, I got to go, I'm running late, I'm super busy, you find that your calendar is consistently overscheduled. You find that you're upset when things change unexpectedly, right? So low stress tolerance. You're irritated when obligations stack up and you're not able to handle them. You often feel overwhelmed by the lack of support you have every day. You wake up feeling like there isn't enough time in the day to get everything done. You find yourself, oh, this is a big one. This is my mom. And I had to work on not doing this, but sighing a lot. You find yourself sighing a lot, like, you go to bed worrying that you didn't finish your to-do list. You frequently feel like there's always something more that you should be doing. You feel wired and tired. You're exhausted by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You have a hard time going to sleep. But then also other things to be looking out for is all of a sudden you're more irritated. I always say, if my husband could just not chew and breathe for the next 5 years in perimenopause, right? Because in perimenopause, it's just a lot of low stress tolerance. Shifts, changes are happening in the brain. And so low stress tolerance, like all of a sudden, this is what it feels like too, is you find yourself negotiating with what you used to be able to do. We're talking about everyday tasks, things that you could just knock out like boom, boom, boom. And you're not able to do them. It requires more intention, right? That could be a stressed state or a lack of stress, a good less stress tolerance. You find yourself more reactive, more snappy, more just kind of everything's just annoying you. That's low stress tolerance, right? That is a system that's more stressed more consistently. You just feel more overburdened with life, that everything just feels like a hurdle. I would say that those are a lot of that sense of just kind of being always in a chronically stressed state. And then more so like the deeper stress, like a more acute kind of moment is feeling anxiousness, deep overwhelm and worry, tightness, breathing becomes shallow, like you're just breathing in a box. Like all of these would be signs of you being in a deregulated stress response system.
All right. And then real quick, 3 up to 3 plus things that you can do kind of in emergencies to de-stress. And then I want to get to, because I'm going to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a hard stop and I want to get into our wrap up questions.
Yeah. So a quick thing to do is, first thing is awareness. Notice your cues. Usually they're physical cues. Like, all of a sudden, again, you're feeling tight, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling snappy, like you're just noticing maybe you're running faster, you're more reactive, like everything's kind of sped up. That's when then you take a moment. The way that you're talking to your family or your people, all of a sudden, you're like, ooh, there's an edge. There's an edge. That's not how I talk to my people. And that's when I call it taking an emotional lap. Mama needs to take an emotional lap, or dad. Alex and I do a great job of tag teaming out. Like if we notice, I'm like, you know what? You get a snack. Why don't you go? You're out. Yeah. Yeah. So awareness, and then I shake again. If it's energy you're holding on to, shake it out, move it out, get outside, grab those tennis shoes, walk outside, literally take an emotional lap. Give yourself a minute to reset, breathe. And so I love the breath where it is an inhale of 5 seconds and exhale 7 to 8 seconds. So that longer exhale is resetting the stress response system. Grab an essential oil like lavender or a citrus oil like wild orange, something that sends, again, it's a state change. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a state change quickly. And so essential oils, aromatherapy can do that for you, depending on the person. Oxytocin. So touch, hug. Again, you may not want to hug the person or touch that person you're next to, but maybe give yourself a little bit of something, or voice memo a friend. I love to work the phones. I am voice memoing all my girls. And so if I'm having a hard time, I will process through a voice memo real quick, because I have such beautiful, safe relationships, that I'll just kind of like, hey, and they just hold beautiful space for me. And I'll be like, hey, I'm just having a moment, just processing this thing out. Because often we can't get on the phone, right? It's hard to do all that. And so I'll shoot off a voice memo while I'm taking like a 3-minute walk. And so there's always a moment for you to take a pause and either breathe it out. For me, it's moving it out. Like I got to discharge that cortisol and that adrenaline.
I'm glad you mentioned essentials oils, because your bestseller is the Essential Oils Hormone Solution. I'm sure we'll give a link where people can find that. Let's get into our wrap-up questions. We'll do these rapid fire. Do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I don't know. No, 95.
95. I like it. And how long do you think humans can live?
Ooh, how how long do I think humans can live? We know the, centenarians, blue zone. I would say, let's say 120.
120. I like it. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts for longevity and a long health span that you would share.
Again, I reconfigure your life around movement. Be outside as much as possible. Move at least 5 to 10 minutes after meals. So you can regulate that blood glucose. And if you don't have them yet, like deep connections, friendships, you find a time to spend time with people that you love in real life, doing the things that you love.
Excellent. And what are 1 to 2 things that people get wrong or absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I think sometimes we think it's about living longer when it's about living healthier. It's about, again, doing the things that we love with the people that we love in real time. And so ensuring that to me, I think that people don't see it as freedom. Not negotiating with oneself about what they want to do, whether it's travel or it's hiking or it's doing those things that they love. And so, I think we should really have it around. I want to be doing very specific things for as long as possible. That gives me a lot of freedom versus trying to just live longer. It's about quality, not quantity.
And how can people contact you?
You can find me, so Energized at Dr. Mariza, Energized podcast. Instagram, it's at Dr. Mariza, DrMariza. And the website is drmariza.com.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
My book number 9. The
Do you have a title? Can you share the title?
Yes. The Perimenopause Revolution. It's coming out October 21st, I believe, 2025, the 3rd Tuesday of October. I'm so excited. We are gearing up for this book. The manuscript is in, everything. I even know what the cover looks like. So I'm very excited. Awesome.
Congratulations on that. All right. So you can find her Energized podcast on Instagram. It's Dr. Mariza. I'm trying too hard. Mariza. And then the book is coming out October 21st. Dr. Mariza, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. It's so much fun.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.